Review for The Elephant Man, directed by David Lynch. A Victorian surgeon rescues a heavily disfigured man who is mistreated while scraping a living as a sideshow freak. Beyond his monstrous facade, there is revealed a person of kindness, intelligence, and sophistication. So this movie came out in 1980. It's widely considered to be one of David Lynch's most accessible movies, if you will. And it's in black and white. I've always thought it was really good. Very sad story. It seems like most of the movie is accurate, but there's kind of different stories that go around about what exactly is true. So he was born John Merrick, 1862, died April 11th, 1890, and Britannica.com says he was a disfigured man who, after a brief career as a professional freak, became a patient of London Hospital from 1886 until his death. Displays of the Elephant Man were part of the Human Curiosities movement. Um, Another website, allthatisinteresting.com, says the story of the Elephant Man sounds like something out of a horror movie. Imagine as a new patient having a beautifully healthy baby boy. Now imagine at age 5, your child's appearance starts to change in unexpected ways. His once perfect lips swell up, his pink skin thickens and turns to a sickly gray hue. A mysterious lump emerges from his forehead. A sack of flesh bubbles from the back of his neck. Both feet grew abnormally large. His right arm grows increasingly deformed and gnarled, while his still normal left arm highlights his transformation in what the world will perceive as a human monstrosity. This is precisely how a young English boy named Joseph Merrick transformed into the 19th century freak show performer known as the Elephant Man. Now, in the movie, I think they pretty much say that his mom was trampled by elephants, and I think he says on some somewhere in Africa, but the guy who says that is like the show performer, and he says he owns him, and he's pretty cruel to him. He mistreats him. He beats him. Anthony Hopkins stumbles upon this show in London, and he finally gets to see the Elephant Man, and he pays for a private showing because it was shut down by the police and he wasn't able to see him. And then when he sees him in a private showing, he then wants the guy to bring him to the hospital. The guy doesn't really want to, and then later the guy beats the Elephant Man, and this little kid that also helps at the show then goes to Anthony Hopkins, who's the doctor, and says you have to come help him because he's sick. His lungs have problems. He can't lay down on a bed normally because his head's so big that his neck would break. So he has to sleep like sitting up with like his head like this. So it's just a terrible story, very sad. Obviously the Elephant Man was probably in a lot of pain and just a very rough life. But and then he brings him to the hospital and basically takes over as his caretaker, pushes the other guy out, but that all later kind of culminates later in the movie. But so this is still from the same website. In some cases, mistakenly referred to as John Merrick. I think in the movie they say John Merrick. but they say his name is Joseph Carey Merrick, 1862, born in Leicester, England. His unusual appearance had begun to present itself, but medically nobody understood what caused his condition. Even today, his precise condition remains mysterious, as DNA tests on his hair and bones have been inconclusive. Without medical guidance, his mother came to her own conclusions, recalling an incident during her pregnancy when she went to a fair. An unruly crowd of people pushed her into an oncoming animal parade. An elephant reared up, and she was briefly caught underfoot, frightened for two lives. She told this story to young Joseph, explaining that this incident has caused his deformities and the pain that sprung from them. In addition to his unusual deformities, he also injured his hip as a child, and subsequent infection made him permanently lame, so he used a cane to help himself walk. His mother, with whom he was close, died of pneumonia when he was just 11 years old. Tragically, even among all other troubles, he called her death the greatest misfortune of my life. It was around this time that he quit school. The anguish felt from others teasing his appearance, now his mother's absence, was just too much to bear. But how would a boy who called his own face such a sight, no one could describe it, survive in such a cruel world? Um, and then it says that he had a stepmother, and she was really mean to him, and he called her the evil stepmother. She arrived 18 months later after his death. And his father wasn't much better. He was also mean to him, and kind of just didn't want to deal with the problems that his son had. Merrick then tried to sell goods from his father's shop door to door, but his contorted face made his speech unintelligible. His appearance frightened most people enough to make them refrain from opening their doors. Finally, one day, his frustrated father severely beat him, and Merrick left home for good. Merrick's uncles heard about his nephew's homelessness and took him in. During this time, Merrick's hawking license was revoked, as he was erroneously seen as a menace to the community. After 2 years, his uncle couldn't afford to support him anymore. The now 17-year-old boy left for the Leicester Union Workhouse. There, Merrick spent 4 years with other men aged 16 to 60. He hated it and came to realize that his only escape might be peddling his deformity as a novelty act. So then that kind of starts his circus performing career, I guess. But the movie starts off, he's already in the circus. So I do think it's a very good movie. I think I haven't watched a lot of David Lynch, but I do like this. I just watched some of Eraserhead, but man, that movie is so weird. There's like this weird alien baby in it, and um yeah, I got like halfway through and I was just like, okay, this is like just bizarre. Yeah, this weird alien baby, and it's all deformed, and it's some dystopian world. I can't even explain it. That's a very strange movie, but yeah, I've always liked this movie. I think there's a lot of emotion in it. Anthony Hopkins is great. He's just trying to help the guy, make him comfortable, even though, you know, sadly, John Hurt, who plays the Elephant Man, who's great in it, asks him eventually, like, "Can you cure me?" And he just says, "No, no, I can't," because it's the late 1800s. Medical science was very basic at the time. They're just starting to learn a lot about the human body, and yeah, there's just little they could do. But he tries to be nice to him. He eventually finds out that he can read and write, and that he can um he recites the Bible. He said he's read the Bible many times, and his favorite part is Psalms. And he starts us reciting the Bible, Another doctor wants to see the Elephant Man, because basically he wants him to leave, because he's like this isn't just a place where you can, house people. And then he meets with the John Hurt, and he just starts reciting lines that Anthony Hopkins made him memorize. So he's like he shouldn't be here. But then John Hurt starts to recite the Bible, and goes through different psalms. So he's like, oh wow. So he's an intelligent man, that can read and has memorized large portions of the Bible. So then it gets that doctor on his side, and eventually even some royalty begin to basically tell the other doctors at the hotel, or at the hotel, at the hospital, that that's part of the tension, is that a lot of the other doctors are like, you're kind of treating this like a hotel, like we can't help him medically, so he shouldn't be here. But then some royalty, a bunch of like an actress, one of the most popular actresses at the time for theater, becomes friends with him, and all of this pushes the other doctors to finally say, okay, fine, he can basically stay in the top of the hospital, kind of like the attic near the bell tower, and they allow him to live the rest of his life there. So spoilers. I like the movie. I don't really have many complaints at all about it. I mean, maybe some of the things in it aren't exactly historically accurate, but it seems like overall it pretty much is. There are pictures of Joseph Merrick, I guess. I don't know why they would get that detail wrong, but there are pictures of him, and the makeup on John Hurt is pretty incredible. So after a while, this one guy who works there begins to basically create a new freak show, and he shows people that he knows at the bar, that are all drunk. They're paying money to go see him in the middle of the night. Anthony Hopkins, no one else knows this. And then unfortunately, the guy who was his former owner, although as Anthony Hopkins says, no man can own another man, because obviously this is after slavery was abolished in England and the Empire. The British abolished slavery in the early 1800s. So, and the slave trade. But so he comes back and he steals them. He brings them to the, I think, like France, and he just starts mistreating them terribly. He puts them in a cage with monkeys, and all the other people that work there, the freaks, if you will, then they don't like this guy. Trying to find, okay, Freddie Jones plays, his name Bites, and they secretly steal John Merrick, put him on a boat back to London, and then he eventually makes his way back to Anthony Hopkins, Dr. Frederick Treves. And on that journey, he almost dies, because people start making fun of him and yelling at him, and children do as well. And really harrowing, sad scene where he's trying to go through the train station, and he can barely walk. He has a limp. He has a cane, and luckily the police then recognize him and bring him to Anthony Hopkins, because he's been like a novelty in the paper for the elites, basically the upper class. This also causes Anthony Hopkins to be like, am I just a new freak show master? Which I guess, is understandable, but I mean, he's trying to make his life a little better, and John Merrick has a huge interest in theater, so I think overall his heart was in the right place. He knew he couldn't cure him medically, but he could make him comfortable, feed him the correct food that, like he feeds him oatmeal and some other things, gives him you know uh pencils and pens, and because he likes to draw, he also likes to create, I guess you would call it, like, miniaturized architecture. Like he creates this church that he could see the bell tower of outside of his window. So he's a talented, like, artist. Pretty, he has a good memory. He has memorized large portions of the Bible, like I said. And at one point, when he's being chased in the train station and he's cornered, he screams, I think he says, "I am not a monster, I am a man. I am not an animal, I am a man." Very emotional scene, because it's very sad. It's there's not much that they could do to help the man. Now, like I said, in this story, it says that after the age of 5, these things started to appear. But you would think if he was like crushed by an elephant in the womb, that when he was born, it would already appeared. But I don't know. See, I'm not sure if it's a genetic condition or if it's because the elephant crushed something when he was in the womb. But I'm not sure why that would appear 5, 6 years later. But so that article I was reading from allthatisinteresting.com/Joseph Merrick. He arrived at London's Liverpool station in 1886, exhausted and still homeless, asking strangers for help, returning to Leicestershire. The police saw the crowds gathering around the disheveled man and detained him. So is this after they? Okay. One of the only possible identifying possessions Merrick had was Dr. Treeves's card. Yeah, so this is after that guy steals him. The police called him up, and Treves immediately picked him up, took him to the hospital, made sure he was washed and fed. After another examination by Treves, he determined that Merrick's now also suffered from a heart condition. He concluded that the 24-year-old likely had only a few years of life left in his deteriorating body. The chairman of the hospital committee then wrote to the editorial of the Times asking the public for suggestions about where he could stay. He received donations for the Elephant Man's care, lots of them. The London Hospital now had funds to care for Merrick for the rest of his life. And it kind of just goes through some of the stuff in the movie that is true. The doctors arranged for a meeting for him with a young, attractive woman named Leela Matern. Treves outlined the situation and briefed her on Merrick's deformities. The meeting made Merrick instantly emotional. It was the first time that a woman had smiled at him or shook his hand. Despite acquiring some semblance of an ordinary life in his last years, Merrick's health steadily declined. The deformities on his face, as well as his entire heart, continued to grow. A hospital employee found him dead in his bed April 11th, 1890, at just 27 years old, but the autopsy reveals a surprising cause of death. Joseph Merrick died doing something that many of us take for granted. He died of asphyxia and had suffered a dislocated neck because he tried to sleep lying down. Man, yeah, and in the movie, I think he drew this picture of this person just lying down on a bed, and that's something that he always wanted to do, but he was never able to do it. And in the end, he knew he was going to die anyways soon. Now in the movie, they don't. I think they don't really get into the new heart problem that he had after he came back from the continent after that terrible guy that owned him, which he doesn't really own him, stole him. But there is a line about how from one of the nurses about does he know that he's going to die soon or it's something like that. So, but yeah, and then he lies on the bed and and this is the part that Roger Ebert real I mean, Roger Ebert was not a fan of this movie. I was kind of surprised at that because it's maybe not it's not a perfect movie, but I think it's really emotional, and I think people should watch it too because I mean it's like no matter how bad your situation is, it could be much worse. I mean, look at this guy, and I mean in the movie at least, he has all these problems, all this pain, and the vitriol of people towards him, but he never really complained much at all, and like he says to Anthony Hopkins, he says something like, I am happier now, and every day I become more happier. Because Anthony Hopkins, I think, is kind of apologizing to him that maybe he was making him a freak show, like showing him off to people, and he was getting accolades, and people were cheering for him, just kind of like they were at the freak show. They were cheering for the showrunner, and he was exploiting him. He felt, and John Merrick says to him like, "No, you have made my life, happy and livable." I mean, he's even able to go to the theater and watch a play with with this starlet that is very nice to him, and they're actually friends. And it seems like the upper class, of London at the time. I'm sure most of them, didn't really care about him, but some of them seem to be somewhat nice to him. So it's just it's a very sad story. Okay, after Merrick's death, Dr. Treefort wrote a memoir. Oh wow, okay, about that I should read that about their time together, in which he erroneously calls him John Merrick. Yeah, apparently his name was Joseph Merrick. Titled the maybe he went by John. And other reminiscences, according to BBC, Merrick's skeleton was preserved at the Royal London Hospital as scientific specimen. However, Merrick's soft tissue was buried elsewhere. Nobody really knew exactly where these remains were until 2019. Wow. The life and times and places of the Elephant Man claimed to have discovered the location of his burial in between an unmarked grave in the City of London Cemetery and Crematorium. He said that the story of Merrick's soft tissue being buried had not been proven because of the number of graveyards at the time. So yeah, Roger Ebert gave it 2 stars out of 4. He just didn't really like it. So the Elephant Man forces me to question this position on 2 grounds. First, on the meaning of Merrick's life, and second, on the ways in which the film employs it. It is conventional to say that Merrick so hideously mis, mis, misformed that he was exhibited as a sideshow attraction was courageous. No doubt he was, but there is a distinction here that needs to be drawn between the courage of a man who chooses to face hardship for a good purpose and the courage of a man who is simply doing the best he can under the circumstances. Wilfred Sheed, an American novelist who was crippled by polio, once discussed this distinction in a Newsweek essay. He is sick and tired, he wrote, of being praised for his courage when he did not choose to contract polio and has little choice but to deal with the handicaps as well as he can. True courage, he suggests, requires a degree of choice, yet the whole structure of the Elephant Man is based on a life that is said to be courageous, not because of the hero's achievements, because simply of bad trick played on him by fate. Yeah, I get that. But still, I think that is courageous because I mean, he like never really complained. He was just, and he was very nice to people. I don't know. I think that is courage. I mean, I don't think he really blamed God, and it's just the cards he was dealt in life, and he tried to do the best with them. The film could have chosen to develop the relationship between Merrick and his medical sponsor along the lines of bonds between doctor and child in True Faults, The Wild Child. It could have bluntly dealt with the degree of Merrick's inability to relate to ordinary society as Werner Herskog Caspar Hauser. Instead, it makes him noble and celebrates his nobility. I kept asking myself what the film was really trying to say about the human condition as reflected by John Merrick, and I kept drawing blanks. The film's philosophy in the shadows. 1. Wow, the Elephant Man sure looks hideous. And 2. Gosh, isn't it wonderful how he kept on in spite of everything? This last is the spite of real possibility that John Merrick's death at 27 might. Yeah, okay. The film's technical credits are adequate. John Hurt is very good as Merrick, somehow projecting a humanity past the disfiguring makeup, and Anthony Hopkins is correctly aloof and yet venal as the Doctor. The direction is competent, although he gives us inexcusable opening scene in which Merrick's mother is trampled or scared by elephants. Who knows? And an equally idiotic closing scene in which Merrick becomes the star child from 2001 or something. Yeah, a little bit, but it's just kind of him drifting off and into the next life or whatever. And I think it's his way of processing it in his mind. I didn't mind that. I thought it was an interesting, artful way to end the movie. The Academy Awards nominee Best Picture, nominee Best Actor in a Leading Role for the Oscars, nominee Best Director, nominee Best Writing, screenplay based on material from another medium, and that's David Lynch and some others. Nominee Best Art Direction. Well, so it didn't win anything. Nominee Best Costume, nominee Best Film Editing, nominee Best Music. Okay, I thought John Hurt may have won, but no. But yeah, I think that's about it. I like the movie. If you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend it. Even Roger Ebert's review. But I think it's a good movie. It's sad, but it's an interesting display of, I think, triumph over a terrible situation. So, and it shows, in the end he was at least able to get some happiness out of this life. But um yeah, that's about it. I mean, the movie is in black and white, so just to remind you, but I think it totally fits because it's takes place in the late 1800s. So, but yeah, if you could smash that like button, that'd be great. It really helps the channel. Check out The Elephant Man, directed by David Lynch, starring the great Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt and Bancroft. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see you next time.